it another minute or so until we get to 7 before we start. In case anybody's going to slide in. It's 7 now. I just turned it. Yeah, okay. All right. We're ready to begin. And this evening, of course, as we are this week, we are talking about unlikely victories. And tonight's focus, as you know, is David versus Goliath. Of course, David in this particular event is a young man, and he gains victory over a giant, a man named Goliath, who was a Philistine soldier standing about 9.5 feet tall. And so, kind of get the idea. Lindsay, that guy looks like he's really mad at you back there. He's looking straight at you, so I might move. I don't know. He looks kind of upset that you're sitting there. But in any case, we are talking about unlikely victories. But, the truth is, when you look at that title, that's really from a human standpoint, because the truth is, as we're going to see tonight, as we saw last night, when God is on our side, victory is not only likely, it's assured. And so that's the reality we learn in these lessons. And so as we look at this, before we get into some background information, Danny, would you mind leading us in prayer for us to start?
Our God and our Savior, we come to you tonight thankful for all that you've done for us, thankful that you love us, allowed us to come together to be able to worship you, to be able to be studying together. As we especially consider our children, Father, we pray that you will be with us and that we will pass on our faith, that we will pass on our love for you to our children, and that they will grow up in you and they will serve you all the days of their life. We ask these things, Heavenly Father, in Christ's name.
Okay, just to kind of give us some background information as we're going into the study, one of the key things that happens just before this particular event, or at least as far as the chapters are concerned, is God decides to choose a new king. And he does this, of course, because Saul, who was Israel's king, was faithless. I mean, he just would not obey God. God gave him time, a chance, time and again. But because of his disobedience, God determined to put someone on the throne that was a person after God's own heart who would keep his commandments. And so what we find out is that God, of course, sent Samuel then in chapter 16 of 1 Samuel to the house of Jesse. And he arrives there, and Jesse has his 7 sons there. And who knows why God rejected the first 7 sons. I know this isn't part of what I asked you to read, but who knows why he rejected the first 7 sons, even though Samuel thought, one of them was likely God's king. What was the problem? Okay, yes?
God looks at the heart and not the physical.
That's exactly right. In 1 Samuel 16 and verse 7, it says, "But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or at the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For God sees not as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." And the reason I bring that up is that is a key issue in our study tonight, in the events involved tonight. What is God, how God sees things and how oftentimes men see things. And so what we need to understand is David's heart is what set him apart. And I got to think about that. That ought to kind of be our motto, shouldn't it? Our heart is what should set us apart. And we know that's the case because, Paul stated about this particular event in Acts chapter 13 and verse 22. It says, "And when he had removed him," talking about removing Saul, "he raised up for them David as king, to whom he also gave testimony and said, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart, who will do all my will." And so, this was the reason God chose him. And when this particular event takes place, David has then already been anointed as king. You know, he's going to be king. And so think about that, because that does kind of come to play, at least in one idea, it seems to me, but we'll talk about that when we get there. And again, we got a lot to cover, and got 40 minutes now to do it, so we're going to kind of tick along. But I'm going to ask you some questions, and I'm not just, there's a few of you that answer a lot, that's fine, but I want others to answer, because these are questions you should know, and I believe you do know them, and I think it kind of enhances the class. And so as we talk about it, we're going to start with Israel and Goliath, because that's really kind of how the narrative begins. And the reason for that is we're going to see David's father sends him to the battle there. And what he's going to find out is what's going on with Israel and Goliath. Now, before I do that, let me say, Daryl is great about kind of setting the stage up for a particular study that he's going to do. You know, he shows you where these events take place. He did that last night. And I thought, okay, maybe I can up my game and do the same. And so I really got to looking, and I'm going to show you where this event takes place. It takes place right there in 1 Samuel 17. Because you can see it right there. It says 1 Samuel 17, and it says David and Goliath. So that's where these events takes place. Now, it was tough. I actually had to take that picture in Trisha's Bible. So no, I'm just kidding. The events take place in the Valley of Elah, or at least that is where the Israelites are camped, and it talks about the Philistines camping between, and now it's fallen out of my head, but in any case, what you see, this valley area, is where Israel would have been. And it seems the Philistines would have been more towards where the camera is looking. So you can kind of picture how this giant would kind of come down the hill and pace around there above the Israelites, taunting them. And so that's kind of what's going on here. And so in 1 Samuel chapter 17, what we're going to find out is, David, after he's been anointed, he's going to be sent there by his father to take provisions to his brothers and others who are fighting this battle. But when he arrives, of course, he finds out something very different is going on. And can I get a reader for these? And there's going to be two particular sections. And so, okay, buddy, there's going to be two, and then I'll get you next, John. So go ahead, buddy.
That a champion came out from the armies of the Philistines from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was clothed with scale armor, which weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze. He also had bronze greaves on his legs, and a bronze javelin slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the head of his spear weighed 600 shekels of iron. His shield carrier also walked before him. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel and said to them, "Why do you come out to draw up in battle array? Am I not the Philistine, and you servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will become your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall become our servants and serve us." Again the Philistine said, "I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. The Philistine came forward morning and evening for 40 days and took the stand.
Okay, so even though David is sent to the battle, does it seem like anybody really wants to fight here? No, I mean, you think about it. He keeps defying the people, but are the Philistines doing anything either? No, I mean, this is going on for 40 days. He just pacing around, saying, is anybody going to fight? Well, nobody seems to want to, be involved in a fight, and especially this winner-take-all fight, and so nothing is happening up until this point. But what was Israel's response to this man? What did it say about them? Yeah, they're scared. I mean, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. That's their response to what's going on here. And of course, that should not be our motto. We, shouldn't be dismayed and greatly afraid. That's not the way God's people should be. And the reason I say, this is really sad that you see what's going on here, because had Israel faced giants before? Yeah. Had they defeated them before? Yes, when did that happen? Yeah, when they were taking the land. You remember at first when they were fearful and many died, it was because of the giants in the land and things like that. But there were giants again in the land when they came to take it. And you can read about these in Numbers 13 and 14, Deuteronomy chapter 1, Joshua chapter 11. They talk about these giants, and yet Israel refused to trust in what they knew God had done in the past. They were not thinking about that and refusing to respond to that properly. And so, okay, any comments real quick? I know we got to move, but anybody have anything to say? All right, well, one of the key things, again, that we need to take from this is, in order to understand how to get through life, what we're going to learn and what I want you to be looking for is that when we gain victories through the Lord, we need to remember those. We need to keep those in mind. And that's one of the reasons when you see people praying in the Old Testament, they bring to mind the things that God has done for them. Because not only are they praising God, but they're reminding themselves of what God can do, so that when the time comes where those victories need to be relied on in trusting God, there they are. And so that's very important. You'll see that involved in the lesson tonight. And so where we go from here is now we go to David, Israel, and Goliath, because David comes on the scene. And John, again, two screens, but read that, please, if you would.
The men of Israel said, "Have you seen this man who's coming up? Surely he is coming up to defy Israel. And it will be that the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches and will give him his daughter and make his father's house free in Israel." Then David spoke to the men who were standing by, saying, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should taunt the armies of the living God?" The people answered him in accord with this word, saying, "Thus it will be done for the man who kills him." Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger burned against David and said, "Why have you come down, and whom have you left for those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your insolence and the wickedness of your heart, for you have come down in order to see the battle." But David said, "What have I done now? Was it not just a question?" Then he turned away from him to another and said the same thing, and the people answered the same thing as before.
Okay, so David comes on the scene, and let me do something here real quick. Need to change something. There we go. Okay. So what was the problem with Israel's view of the situation? What were they looking at? Okay, yeah. I mean, the first thing they say is, "Have you seen this man?" What's the problem with that? Who do they serve? Who created man? Yeah, God is not fearful of man, but that's what they're looking at. Have you seen this man? Earthly perspective, which God is not hindered by such things, and they should know that. And so upon arriving, David, hears Goliath's defying of God, his people, and he asks, what's going to be offered to this guy that, defeats this Philistine. And yet, David was rebuked by his brother. His brother didn't like that at all. And he says, he's full of pride. He's wicked here. He's usurped his place from the family. He's left the sheep behind. And let me ask you this. Yes.
Well, there's another point that, and you may be about to get to it, and I apologize if you are, but Eliab seems to have this arrogance, and he's also just putting David under his thumb. Who left you with those few sheep?
Yeah.
His father was not a poor man. He didn't have a few sheep. He was doing his best job he could to humiliate his little brother.
Yeah, and I think there's a reason for that, as we'll see here in just a minute. But let me ask you this. Is this the first time an Israelite brothers have rejected their younger brother for basically the same reasons? You're arrogant. Who did they do it to? Yeah, Joseph. You remember? He tells them the dream, and they're like, "Who are you? You think we're going to bow down for you? You're arrogant." All those kinds of things. And so this is not the first time that brothers have despised their younger brother who actually became their deliverer. And that's what's about to happen again. And so, here though, the problem with what is being said by David is what? What do you think it did to his brother? Why did it make him so angry? Put him to shame is what it did. It emphasized the reality that he's right there with Israel and they're faithless. They're standing there for 40 days looking around doing absolutely nothing. And David has pointed out this guy is defying the armies of the God of heaven. What in the world is going on here? And so I think that is what made him so angry. It pricked his conscience and showed him to be faithless in a way that, was not, flattering in any way, the way he was acting. Okay, any thoughts before we move on? I know we got a lot to read. I know we're moving, quickly, but that's because we got a lot to read. But, okay. Next one. Again, 2 slides. Somebody else want to read? Anybody? Okay, yeah, sure, please.
Me? Yes. Okay.
You were volunteering, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
Okay, all right, good.
When the words which David spoke were heard, they told them to Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail on account of him. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine." And David said to Saul, "You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, while he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant was tending his father's sheep. When a lion or bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went out after him and attacked him and rescued it from his mouth. And when he rose up against me, I seized him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has killed both lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, since he has taunted the armies of the living God." And David said, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." So David said to Saul, "Go, and may the Lord be with you."
All right, so David is now taking a stand. And the truth is, who's acting like a king now? Yeah, it's not Saul. It's this young man, David. He is far more kingly in his actions than is Saul, who should have been the one, leading the people towards this, in dealing with this particular enemy. But let me ask this. Why did Saul think David's victory was so unlikely?
Because he was just a child, really. He was a youth, and here is Goliath, who's been training as a warrior from his youth.
Yeah. So, he says, you're not able to go against this Philistine to fight him. You're but a youth while he has been a warrior from his youth. Yeah. You're little, you're small, you're weak. He's big, he's strong. You're inexperienced. He's got worldly experience. And again, what's the problem with that evaluation?
It's the opposite of what they did at Ai. They forgot to consult God because they thought they were too big. Here they forget to consult God because they think they're not big enough.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And of course, again, what are they looking at? What's Saul? Physical. Yeah, it's a worldly, earthly view of things. And folks, I can tell you, if you want to stall a church, get them to look at the physical. Start looking at the physical things and all of those things, putting, them first and all of that. And boy, you talk about causing the power to drain out of a congregation. You can't do that. And so Saul is doing that, and he's got Israel doing that, because their leader has no power, no confidence in God. They have no confidence in God. And so he despises David's youthfulness. And, the truth is, we should never do that. When folks, us older people like me, when God's involved, we need to be careful what we think about young people. Because when God's involved, folks, things happen. Just like here. In 1 Timothy 4 and verse 12, he says, Paul told Timothy, let no one look down on your youthfulness, but rather in speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity, show yourself an example to those who believe. And so that as older people, when God is involved in people's lives, do not look down on youth. There's amazing things God can do through them, but at the same time, as a young person, rebuff that despising by the way you live. That's what David did. David rebuffed this despising that was put upon him by Saul by putting faith in God. That's what he did. And because of that, David was ready to go to battle because David knew he was going to win. And he knew he was going to win because he knew, he said, if you remember, when I was a shepherd, God delivered me from a bear and a lion. And you notice he says, when that happens, notice too, the second part is, this uncircumcised Philistine will be the same way. When David says uncircumcised Philistine, David is seeing a much bigger picture here. How is David seeing this? Somebody, just think about it. So maybe somebody hadn't answered. How is David, what's the bigger picture behind this battle? Yes?
The circumcision's the sign of the promise. So he's calling out saying, he's not a child of the promise.
Yes. And he's not in the covenant, is he? And so what's this? This is not just a battle between the Philistines and Israel. Who's it a battle between? Satan and the people of God. This is a spiritual battle. This has to do with an uncircumcised Philistine. This guy is not with God. See, and folks, what we have to understand, when he says they're defying the army of God, the armies of God, that's a reality because that was the real battle at the time that was taking place. It was also in the spiritual realm, but it was working out in the physical realm with the nations being used by Satan to try to destroy God's plan. And that's exactly what you got going on here. Yes?
I also think there's another side to David's willingness to go. It's not just his faith in God, but there's 3 times, once it's stated implicitly and twice it's referred to, the reward that Saul promises.
Okay.
David said, and he said, what is it that's going to be done for him? So David not only had faith in God, but he also could see the reward that was on the other side of the opposite.
Okay. Yeah.
I sometimes preach that, that's our Goliath that's standing between us and the reward.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, very true. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. And so, yes, Danny.
Just say it's so easy to forget how young David is. Right?
Yeah.
Especially when you think about all of the achievements that he's talking about, like the way he couches them, the way he praises them, all the glory, not even like partial goes to him, but it's all the glory goes to God.
Yep.
And that the thing that he's concerned about with Goliath is not like gaining more land or something like that. The thing that he's worried
Yeah.
And that's why he has to
Yeah.
take that.
And you notice he says, again, the Lord will deliver the Philistine. Yeah. That's the issue. The Lord will do this because, again, yeah. And later he's going to say, this has to happen because everybody here, and you know, he's not just talking about the Philistines, he's talking about the Israelites. You need to see that God doesn't need your sword to win this victory. And you need to trust in that, and we'll see that in just a minute. But, you know, there's something else, too, that, and I brought this up earlier, just kind of alluded to it. What had God promised David that he would be? He's going to be the king, isn't he? Well, is David doing the will of God here and taking on this Goliath, this Philistine? Absolutely. Should he fear then the Philistine stopping, you know, somehow him or killing him when he is doing God's will in attacking this Philistine and God had promised him, you will be king? You see, when you put those two together, when you do, you see the promises of God and you see doing His will, well, folks, I tell you, when you put those two together, you don't lose and you don't fear. You do what God says, just like David here. And folks, that's the same thing. Because has God made us king and made us rule? What is 1 Peter 2? We're a kingly priesthood, are we not? Where are we sitting? With Christ in heavenly places, are we not? Isn't that what Ephesians 2 and verse 6 talks about? And you know, all of these things we need to understand that this was not just something special of David. This is the kind of trust we need to live with and not fear our giants, folks, because when we look at the promises of God, then, you know, we shouldn't fear when we're doing God's will because we're going to win. Yes, buddy.
When Saul was chosen, he hid the luggage. When David was chosen, he killed Goliath.
Okay. When Saul
Saul was chosen, he hid the luggage.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But when David was chosen, he killed Goliath.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, that's true. Or at least when he was chosen, he was hiding in the luggage. Yeah. So yeah. But no, you may be right as far as the timing of that. But yeah, that is an interesting comparison. Very true and kind of indicative of what's going on now, isn't it? And kind of indicative of their, of Saul's kingship too, kind of hiding in the luggage. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, very good point. All right, so now we're going to talk about David and Goliath because, you know, what we've really done is, you know, David has come on Israel dealing with Goliath. They're not dealing with him properly. Now David, you know, is dealing with Saul, who is not dealing with Goliath properly. And so now David's going to have to deal with Goliath because nobody else will. And so what we find is, of course, David then takes up arms. And in chapter 17, beginning verse 38, we're not going to read it all, but down through we're not going to read through this particular section at all, but in 38 through 40, Saul, you know, after he tells David, you know, well, okay, you can go. And then he gives David his armor and his sword. And David says, no, you know, I'm not used to wearing this. I haven't tested this. And so he gives it all back. And David arms himself. And who knows, how does David arm himself? What does he arm himself with? There's three. It mentions three things, maybe. Yes.
The 5 cents at the river side. The 5 cent moves down at the river.
Okay. Yeah. And he puts those, the second thing, it's not really an arm. He puts it in his pouch, his shepherd's pouch. And he has one other thing with him. What is it? Yeah. His staff. Okay. Yeah, well, he actually has two things. Yeah. His sling and the staff. Yeah. So he's got, so I guess in a sense, you might say he had three things. He had stones, and he had a staff, and he had a sling. Yeah. All of those things he arms himself with. And so I looked up, and that actually, apparently, that's the brook that he got the stones from. That is the brook of Elah, apparently. And so they believe that would likely, because it's been there all this time, would have been the place that he got the stones out of. And so that's kind of neat. You think you could go there, and go near, likely very, very near, if not, be at the same place where David took those stones from this brook. What does David's choice of these weapons say about his view of the conflict? Think about it. Stones and a sling and a staff. What does that say about David's view of the conflict? Okay, yes, Art, I don't think you've answered yet, so go ahead.
Yeah, I think to me, it's the same outfit that he went out to shepherd the sheep. It's the same things that God kind of outfitted him with to do every job, and it doesn't matter the enemy, the tools are the same.
Yeah, and so was it about his prowess? Was it about his strength and all those kinds of... No, it wasn't about any of that. This wasn't about, boy, I just, I'm going to really deal with this guy because I'm quite good with all this. No. You notice he didn't say, I'm so good with a sling, I took down a bear and I took down a lion. What did he say? God took down the bear. God took down the lion. So I think these choice of the weapons were the fact that these are the ones he had in the previous trials when God delivered him. And again, I think we need to make that kind of connection that, as we live our lives and we trust in God, understand it's not us doing it. And so therefore, as we remember God bringing us through, those same weapons that got us through then, if we will remember, will get us through now, when the real troubling times come. And that's what David did. And so, David, first of all, before he went into battle, you remember he shed the encumbrance, the cumbersome armor, didn't he? Does God tell us we need to shed anything when we go to serve him? Yes, he actually does. Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. Someone want to read? Clint, you want to read that, please?
Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God.
Okay, see, so as we enter into our journey and our battles of life, first thing God tells us to do is get rid of the stuff hindering us. Get rid of the sin and the things that are going to slow us down. Got to get rid of those. And Art, you remember, you mentioned that he went with what he was, been equipped with before when God had been with him. Does God equip us with anything today? Yeah, the same thing. He gives us, the armor, the means of dealing with life comes from God. Okay, need another reader, somebody volunteer. Yes, please, Tony, and then I'll get you next.
Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness, and in heavenly places. Therefore, take up the full armor of God, so that you will be able to resist in every evil day, and having done everything, to stand firm.
I think that passage tells us that the very same reasons David took stones and a sling and a staff is the reasons we take this armor. It's all about God, It wasn't about David, He saw the battle was far bigger than just this Philistine. This was a battle of Satan versus God's people. That was it. This was Satan attempting to destroy God's plan. He saw that. He's an uncircumcised Philistine. And folks, that's what we need to understand. That's why we need spiritual weapons, because we're fighting a spiritual battle. It's far bigger than the problem you've got at work with somebody bothering you. Yeah, that's a problem, but we got to look at the bigger picture of all of that and see how our lives in Christ are to deal with that. And that, even if that's never resolved because there's somebody at work that's never going to give us the break that we want, in the end, the Lord's people are going to win. And that's hard for us to, I get that. I get that, but it's still the truth, and it's something this particular event tells us to remember. Okay, we've got about 11 minutes, so we're going to have to move on. And let's see, Jason, you want to read, please? It's two slides as usual.
Then the Philistine came on and approached David with the shield bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, ruddy, with a handsome appearance. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine also said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field." And David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. This day the Lord will deliver you up into my hands, and I will strike you down and remove your head from you. And I will give the dead bodies of the army of the Philistines this day to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord is not delivered by a sword or by spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands."
Okay, so David enters the battle, with God, with faith in God. And so when he got out there, did Goliath, just run, off the field? Because, oh, wow, he's coming with God. He didn't. In fact, what did Goliath think of David and his weapons?
Not much.
Yeah, not much. Yeah, he disdained him. It's interesting. I always thought that's kind of interesting because he was a youth, he was ruddy, and he was handsome in appearance. That almost sounds like, if he was older, he would be ugly. It's like you get older, you get ugly, but since he's young, he's handsome in appearance, Interesting. I think that's kind of funny to me. Of course, you're looking at me going, no, it's not funny. It's true. There it is. But in any case, so he didn't leave. He didn't think much of David. In fact, he makes fun of him. What does he say about the weapons? Like you'd use on a what? On a little dog. And I can tell you, when you see that guy right there, he wasn't a dog. He's a big dude. This is a big dude. And David comes out there with this little sling. That's like a dog. So, the fact that he doesn't leave tells us, does God promise that when we trust him that all our problems are going to go away? Nobody's ever going to do anything to us. There's never going to be an attack. Everybody's going to leave us alone. We've got rights, don't we? Yeah, we do. Sort of. But not like that. Not in God's kingdom, because I tell you, they didn't leave the Son of God alone either. And so who should we fear?
God.
Yeah. Fear God. Don't fear man. Matthew 10, 28-31. Do not fear those who will kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a cent, and yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father, but the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So do not fear, for you are more valuable than many sparrows. Fear God. That's the key. That is a lesson telling us here. Don't fear man. Fear God. He's the one in charge. And if he cares about you, which he does, boy, who else do you want on your side? Who is greater to have on your side than God? And so, when Goliath approached, did David run? No. Why did David stay?
Because the battle belonged to the Lord.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, that's what he said, you know. He tells him, you come with a sword and spear, I come in the name of the Lord. And I can tell you, those aren't equal. I can assure you, yes.
But notice one of the statements that David makes, I'll take your head.
Yeah.
He didn't have a weapon to take it.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Isn't that something? Yeah, yeah. I'm going to take your head off of you is what it says, yeah.
That means he's intending to take Goliath's sword.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's not going to happen in normal cases, is it? You know, yeah, exactly. And so, because he says, the Lord does not deliver by sword or spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. See, he wanted everybody to know that. That's why he took the stand. And think about it, folks. That's the reality that God's trying to. That's the reason for all these accounts here, is for us to see that we trust God. And God doesn't, you know, people say, well, I'm just not talented. That doesn't matter. David wasn't a big warrior either. But he won because God was with him. It was God's will and God's promises. Yes, buddy, very quickly.
Goliath, for 40 days, is just running his mouth.
Yeah.
In Israel, Saul is afraid because of his size. They're not doing anything.
Yep. Yeah.
But the other thing we know, Saul said he was a warrior trained from you. We don't. I mean, that didn't come from the Philistines. We don't know that.
Yeah. I would suspect that's true, just because I suspect Saul knew his enemy pretty well. It probably wasn't even the first time they'd ever heard of this guy, you know. Yes.
It's not the first time that the Israelites have forgotten what the Lord has said many times over, but it's been said to them before, be strong and courageous, do not fear or be in dread of them. In Deuteronomy 31, talking about,
Yeah.
anyways, but don't be afraid. I'll never forsake you.
Yeah.
I'm going to be with you.
Yeah.
You can overcome this with me.
And folks, those are the things we've got to remember. And I get that. It's hard, you know. Folks, there are things in life that are scary. I get it. There are very scary things from just a worldly standpoint. I understand that. And it's hard. But we've got God on our side, and we've got God's people. You know, interesting thing is, did David have God's people behind him here? No, he didn't. He didn't. That's sad. Yeah.
See, the thing about it is, even though Saul and the Israelites were to serve God, what they failed to realize that David brought to that battle and told them is, I've got God's armor. His heavenly armor is catching me. I'm standing on this battlefield, facing him with that, and there's no weapon fashioned against us that can stand.
Can you imagine? You remember and I'm totally, somebody tell me the scene where all of a sudden he was allowed, that the person was allowed to see the armies of the Lord. When was that?
Was it Elisha?
Yeah, I was thinking that, and I just, can you imagine if you could see the reality of what's going on here? The armies of the Lord surrounding them. And God's just looking at his Israelites going, why aren't you moving? You know, we're just, why are you not moving? God's army's here, you know. And folks, that is something we have to remember. We're God's army, and we will not be defied by the world and without consequences. Yes, here and here. Then we got 2 minutes, and I got a little bit of reading to do. Yes, quickly.
Oh, really quickly, we've kind of danced around it without putting it into words that Israel was in charge of God's reputation.
Yep.
And if we remember that, maybe we will be a little bit more bold for ourselves.
Yes, yes. Because, we are, God's people, God's army. We're, as I was saying, we're the Bible sometimes, that the only Bible people will see is who we are. Yes, Phyllis.
Well, it's just like the principle of, if you're faithful in the little things, then you'll be faithful in much. Here, David, in his everyday life, sought the Lord's guidance in taking care of those sheep, the lion, the bear. And then he knows that even in this big thing, he seeks God, and God's going to deliver him. So you got to look, it's everyday life.
Yes. And that's such a key point. If we don't trust God in our daily life, we're not going to be ready when the big day, people say, oh, I'll die for the Lord. Well, okay, well, will you give up that sin for the Lord then? Will you give up this for the Lord? Tomorrow, today, well, if you won't do that, you won't die for the Lord. Okay, very quickly, another reader. Yes, please, John.
Then it happened when the Philistine rose and came and drew near to meet David, that David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand into his bag and took from it a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine on his forehead. And the stone sank into his forehead so that he fell on his face to the ground. Thus David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. And he struck the Philistine and killed him, but there was no sword in David's hand. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine and took his sword and drew it out of its sheath and killed him, and cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. The men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines as far as the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the slain Philistines lay along the way to Sharon, even to Gath and Ekron.
Okay, so very quickly, why would we say this was an unlikely victory? Well, just give me quickly some reasons why this would appear to be so from a worldly standpoint. What's one of the reasons? Give me one.
Overmatched.
Huh?
They were overmatched.
Okay, yeah. Big, small. All right. What else? Experience. Weapons. Yeah. Weapons. What else?
Attitude.
Yeah. I mean, they're just, and think about it. Remember, David, at least the Philistines has the people behind him. David didn't, The Israelites are faithless, and yet David wins because he trusted in God. And so what was the result of David winning this by his faith? What did it do to the Israelites?
Suddenly they got real brave.
Yeah, and they fought, and they destroyed, the Philistines fled, and the Israelites chased them and defeated them. And again, the point is, folks, when we stand for the Lord, it's contagious. People see it and people respond to that. Yes?
You said it.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
Would you consider David the type of Christ here?
I think there's so many things. Yeah.
One man say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was the deliverer. He was. Yeah. There are so many things. Yeah. That would be true of. Yeah.
Did you ever ask why he took 5 stones?
No, I didn't.
I've heard several different theories, but Goliath had 4 brothers.
Huh.
And maybe
I knew they talk about that some of them got killed.
David might have thought, well, if I kill Goliath, his brothers are going to be the first ones thrown at.
Huh. I heard. Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's it or not, but it's poetic.
Interesting thought. Yeah. All right. Thank you, folks. Appreciate it very much.